girl Jay Renee with Prison Ride Radio. I hope that you're doing well. This morning we got a brother on the phone by the name of Jeffery Holland, and he has a lot going on. And we're going to dive into it and give him an opportunity to let us know what's going on, and we're going to figure out how we can support him from there. So let's jump right into it. Morning, brother. Thank you for pulling up on us.
I am Jeffrey Holland, and on behalf of my brother,
This call is from a federal prison.
Harvey Holland, and myself, I want to extend our deepest gratitude to you, God, and Mrs. J. Renee, and you, the listener, for affording us the opportunity to use this platform for the purpose of exposing the grave injustice brought against the both of us by the federal justice system. This message from two men who are currently in prison is our sincere attempts at obtaining much-needed assistance in the regaining of our freedom. My brother and I didn't come from a perfect household, and although in today's society, the majority of all households are far from being picture perfect. We are the product of a violent and disruptive environment and had experienced substantial losses at too early an age. For example, we were raised by our mother who was shot by our father while she was carrying Harvey, the oldest of the two of us. We grew to know little about our parents because our mother died in a car accident and our father was non-existent. This led us to having to live with other relatives, which forced us to extend our abuse as well as learning to support ourselves. At 5 years old, I witnessed my uncle commit suicide by gun. Sometimes it's extremely hard to escape the consequences of one's upbringing. My brother and I learned to live a hard life on the other side of the line because it was the only life available to us. Of course, all this led us both to criminal activity as a means of financial support. I was arrested in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in 2001 for selling 20s of crack cocaine. At this time, I was what one would consider a low-level offender, and Harvey never once sold a drug. In fact, the prosecutor pulled my brother into a superseding indictment when our nephew, who was on the other initial indictment, was shot and killed. Before I continue, please allow me to explain that Harvey and I both received life sentences due to the jury finding the 50 grams of crack cocaine. With that stated, I will now explain why we was never supposed to receive these life sentences. There was a homicide charge in our indictment, but there wasn't any eyewitnesses' testimony to seeing me and my brother involved in this homicide. Me and my brother maintained our innocence. We did not murder anyone. The only information the government used was jailhouse informants testifying to alleged admissions made by me that I had been involved. Let me also explain, there was never any physical evidence linking us to the homicide. The jury was unable to reach a verdict on the count charging us with homicide, so the prosecutor asked for the charge to be dismissed. And although the charge was dismissed, Judge Caldwell had other plans with regards to it in the form of relevant conduct. This brings us to the drug charge. It was clear that I had sold 20s of crack cocaine. However, in order for the Harvey and myself to receive the life sentence given us, the jury must find beyond a reasonable doubt that I distributed 50 grams or more of crack cocaine. As the trial progressed, it became most obvious that the government evidence was insufficient. In fact, the prosecutor never present any evidence of specific weights or quantities of drugs to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. The evidence of this comes in the form of a question from the jury during the deliberation process. The question was, how much crack weight is in a $20 bag? The jury rationale behind their question was, we have no reference to determine weight, no direct testimony evidence at specific weights, amounts, etc. At this point, it's even more apparent that the government did not fulfill their burden of proof. And as clear as this was to Harvey and myself, it was even more so to Judge Caldwell. Judge Caldwell, rather than stay in his position as official mediator, he chose to tag himself in and assist the prosecutor in his response to the jury's question. He proceeded to give his depiction of what he heard during the trial. Speaking of amounts 500 to 1,000 grams, he even used examples of apples, oranges, and a tissue box as comparison for what the drugs might weigh. If in the shape of these examples, he went so far as to step down from his perch on the bench and stand directly before the jury, totally abusing his discretion and completely obliterating our Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights. If Judge Caldwell heard all of this at my trial, then why didn't the jury hear it? The jury's main job is to listen, isn't it? Now, why would Judge Caldwell do something like that? Relevant conduct is criminal conduct that is used by the judge to heavily enhance the defendant's sentence, despite the defendant being not found guilty of said conduct. Judge Caldwell wholly intended to sentence Harvey and myself to life. However, he knew that if the jury could not make a finding of 50 grams or more of crack cocaine, The most time a judge can impose is 20 years in accordance with the statutory maximum for unknown quantities. However, if the jury made a finding of 50 grams or more, Judge Carlin could then use the relevant conduct of the homicide charge to enhance our sentence well past the statutory maximum of 20 years, and it's exclusively for this reason that Judge Carlin blatantly and deliberately influenced the jury verdict. Bottom line, my brother and I were cheated. Judge Carlin's actions caused Harvey and myself to be sentenced far in excess of the statutory maximum, which also destroyed the fairness, integrity, and public reputation of the judicial proceeding in our case. I would also like to say thank you to the listeners once again, and we need your help in regaining of our freedom so that we together can educate our youth and ensure that they do not have to be affected by a system that knows no real justice. God bless.
All right, brother, that was definitely a lot for
Yeah, that was
to
a
put
lot.
down on us.
Yeah,
So I just want to ask you a couple of questions so we get a little bit of more clarity of what happened in the courtroom, okay? Um, I know that you and your brother had legal representation. What was
yes,
that
sir.
about?
All right, the legal representation was it was public defenders. You know what I mean? It was public defenders. They didn't represent us to the fullest at all. You know what I mean? 'Cause like I said, my brother didn't have nothing to do with it. They wanted my nephew to testify on me, make lies, and so when my nephew got killed, they brought my brother in and and arrested him. And he said, look, my brother said, I don't got nothing to do with it. They said, well, if you don't testify on your brother and tell us what we want to hear, we're gonna prosecute you too. You know what I mean? So they just put us in the jail, and while we was in the jail, people made a mission saying we both told, oh yeah, they told us they did this crime, but they wanted me to put the crime on somebody else at first. They was like, look, just tell us he did it, and I was like, nah, I ain't put myself. I don't have nothing. I don't know nothing about it. That's all I sold was 20s, Miss J. Renee. 20s. And I've been locked up 24 years for selling 20s of crack, and the laws have changed dramatically. You know, and the judge, the prosecutor, everybody in my case is dead and passed away, and me and him is the only one in here. You know, so that's a
Yeah.
little bit, of what's going on. 20s of crack, that's all I'm in here for selling. And they didn't, Mr. J. Renee, they didn't have the 20s. It was just testimony that I sold 20s.
This call
Oh,
is from a federal prison.
so it was off of hearsay, right?
Yeah, just hearsay. Look, Mr. J. Renee, look, the jury was not going to make a finding of the drug weights. They was asking, they said, well, how much drugs is involved in this case? They said, we don't know. The judge, he heard 500 grams to 1,000 grams. When he said that, they believed him. You know what I'm
Of
saying? And the
course.
case, okay.
I said, of course
So,
they did. He a judge, so
yeah,
why wouldn't they
yeah,
be like, oh, okay, that must be true?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. They sitting in the verdict form. They said we had my case is based off a dry conspiracy, no drugs and evidence. They said we got no testimony. I've only been looking at 0 to 20 years, right?
Hmm.
It's the max. I was supposed to get. So I did 17 years. I mean, been locked up for 24 years for a crime they couldn't even prove. And like I said, they put a murder on me because I wouldn't testify on another dude. So when they put it on me, the jury didn't find me guilty of it. They came
Right.
back after the jury make if the jury don't make a finding of 50 grams, I would only been looking, like I said, 20 years. He had to influence the jury to make the finding of the 50 grams, so he can use the relevant conduct on me. Right? And that's what I found out, and through my studying law, and found out and these lawyers completely failed me. So new lawyers came on, and they wrote letters to me. The head of the public defense, he said, yeah, you're right. I sent them to you. He said, yeah, you're right. The judge did unfairly influence the jury. But what you want me to do now? You know what I'm saying? And other lawyers said the same thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Both of them do. I said,
They
thank you.
asked
So when
you. They asked you what they want them to do now.
yeah, what you want me to do now? So I said, okay, you told me. I sent the letter to you. He said, yo, he said, yeah, I agree with you. The judge did unfairly
I
influence you.
did see
Both of
that
them said,
letter. I saw it.
I seen him. So right, I'm asking him. He said, so what? With another phone call, he said, what do you want me to do? I said, look, expose this man, right? So I sent it to the court. He coming mad. He's like, yo, why would you do that? Why would you do that? I said, because look, man, I'm trying to fight for my life, and you won't help me. So they brought me back for a hearing, right?
Yeah.
And when they brought me back for a hearing, when I was about to tell them what the judge did to me, they told me if I say anything about that, they was going. It was to have me in the back of the court, right? So this was they was really blown away, Mr. Terry. I was somebody out there to my family. You think I'm saying? So all my brothers and sisters have passed away. My sons, my sisters and them, my brothers and siblings, all my siblings had kids. So out of 24 years, 2022, I had a hearing, and then all my nieces and nephews was there. They was blown away to see that, damn, this black man had been locked up all this time, and he got some family support like that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So they was blown away by that. So I'll never forget, the lawyer came out in the back. She said, listen, man, your family ain't here. I said, I ain't even worrying about that. I said, my family's great. They're going to show up. So, um, so when I came out there, they was talking about, yo, if you say anything in this hearing about what that judge did to you, even though he's dead, they said you ain't gonna be watching this hearing from the proceeding. So when I went there, it was all smoke mirrors, and they wouldn't even let me talk about what the judge did to me. It's all a miscarriage of justice, man. What they did to me. You know what I'm saying? They
So,
was just mad because.
well, I was gonna ask you who was the ones that said for you not to say anything.
The attorney that Mrs. Blasio, the one that wrote me the one letter wrote, one attorney, Ms. Blasio, said, when I come out for this hearing, I bet I can't say nothing. The judge them said if I say anything, they was gonna do some crazy shit, have me in back of the hearing. So I didn't really say nothing. I was like, all right, maybe this go all pan out. But you know what I'm saying? Is it now at the bottom line that I know I got to get some exposure to what they doing.